All right, what's up, guys? We're back. Chapter 5 of Roar, Weighty Matters. So the whole point of this is just a conversation around weight, body type, and how to fuel to work with your body type as opposed to fighting your body type. And I think one of the most significant things she said is, and I've noticed this, a lot of people, not just women, but this book is about women, men and women say, oh, my fighting weight is X. Like, this is where I work the best because it's where I was 5 years ago, and I liked myself better 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Something like that. So creating an arbitrary number on the scale isn't super helpful for working with your physiology and having your body work well and look good. Because I do know quite a few people, men and women, on this where they're always, man, if I was like 5 pounds less, if I was 5 pounds less, and shit, I do that.
We all do.
So it's a good reminder to don't choose a number and then pursue that, but what is your body type? And then how can you work with your body type to optimize how it performs and how you can do both, how it performs and how it looks. But we'll talk about the body types a little bit more. What jumped out to you?
Well, I think one thing I was just thinking of a second ago is that it's important when you're talking about weight to determine if you are more focused on health span, lifespan, or performance for a specific goal. Because I think Stacy mentions it in the chapter, but an important concept is not necessarily just the number on the scale, but rather like what's your power to weight ratio. Or if you're training for longevity and optimal health, then that is a totally different goal. So an easy example with one of my mentors, Meg Stone. She was Meg Ritchie at the time, but she is a 2-time Olympian and was a discus thrower. And she, at her, quote unquote, competition weight or fighting weight, however you want to call it, was substantially heavier than she is now that she's no longer a competitive athlete. So I think if you're focused simply on what is the number on the scale and what people think they should weigh compared to what's going to actually optimize performance, totally different, types of diet and training styles.
Yep, absolutely. For me, my sport is the opposite of that. I don't need to gain weight. I need a cut before performance season. So I float around 190 to 200 throughout the whole year. And then I spend 8 weeks getting light. And I maintain that light weight, which for me is about 180, 185. And I spend 2 weeks there to perform and try to accomplish goals climbing because lighter is easier. And then I go back up. And that's a good way for me to not get hurt. Whereas if you're always fighting, if I tried to live at 180, 185, I'd lose muscle mass. And that's not helpful from a longevity purpose. It might help me be a better rock climber in the short term, but not in the long term.
Yeah, and this is a little bit outside the primary focus of the chapter, but I think it's important for people to know that you can't be at your peak 100% of the time.
Nope.
It's just not feasible, it's not sustainable, and it's ultimately not good for your longevity. So there are always going to be times in your year, whether you're thinking about just what activities you're doing outside, if you're training for a specific goal, that your body weight will fluctuate. And that's okay because you're focusing on different qualities throughout your year.
Yeah, and this is in the book. It's easier, just the way our bodies work, to put on mass in the winter and easier to get lean in the summer. And that's just the rhythm of our body. It has to do with survival mechanisms from way back when. We're kind of removed from that cycle now, but that's a hang on. Kind of going through my notes, an important thing is to focus on lose fat as opposed to get skinny. If you put on muscle mass, which is, as a woman, you have to train to put on muscle mass if you want to perform well, if you want to last a long time. Everything's better. Muscle mass is probably one of the most important things you can do. There's several chapters that cover this. So put on muscle mass, focus on that first, and then if you want to shed some body fat, do that second, and it will be easier because the number of calories you burn just to maintain that mass is higher. And that's kind of a common thing among strength and conditioning.
And lean tissue is much more metabolically active anyways.
Yeah, 100%. That's what drives your BMR up, base metabolic rate. And then for the typical relationship, this is true for men and women. It used to be the female athlete triad, but it's changed to red S or reds. Different people say it a little bit different. But if you're fighting to train really hard and restrict calories at the same time, you are going to have an energy deficiency, and that creates a whole lot of problems.
Oh, yes.
You want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I mean, I think one of the main reasons they've changed that terminology from female athlete triad to red S is that it's much more than a triad. There are all kinds of downstream effects of being calorically restricted. It'll cause disruptions in menstrual cycle. You won't be able to recover from your training. It can lead in extreme cases to certain types of eating disorders, and it will compromise your immune system. It can affect your sleep quality. So there are all kinds of things that are affected within red S, but the take-home point for me is that it is avoidable, and that is through proper fueling. So if we can make sure that we are not putting ourselves into a long sustained energy deficiency, then you avoid that problem.
Correct. And red S stands for relative energy deficiency in sport. And so that doesn't mean you can't get lean and be healthy. You can get incredibly lean, but you have to make sure you're consuming enough calories and the right type of macros, the right micronutrients to sustain your body. So do not focus on getting smaller and working harder. Focus on building muscle mass, and then in a separate time, if for performance or even just you got an event like a wedding coming up or something, you want to front load, put on muscle mass, back load, lose a little bit of fat mass. And you can measure all that with a DEXA scan. That's the best tool in body. If you use the higher quality, there's like different categories. There's like the cheap ones and the expensive ones. The expensive ones work a little bit better. That's a decent one. Bod Pod is a decent one that's pretty inexpensive, and they're accessible. Your local university hospital, if you're around a university. And then a lot of kind of wellness clinics are popping up that will have something like that. It's an easy Google search for your area. Yeah,
and I think the most important thing if you're trying to determine what you have available and you want to be able to track these numbers is try to find what the reliability and precision of it is, not necessarily like the base level accuracy. Because if you've got a scale that at least is relatively reliable, then you can use it to track long-term changes. And ultimately, I think the most important thing is to be able to inform what you're doing with some sort of background. Even if it's not, gold standard DEXA, right?
Yeah, just having something makes sense. And then this was a part that I really appreciated because I think it's a good talking point for a lot of people is figure out your soma type. So soma type is your body type. You've got ectomorph, mesomorph, endomorph. Ectomorph is that lady that that she eats whatever she wants and she's always a twig. That's the ectomorph. Mesomorph, that's your basic athletic build. And then endomorph, that's your curvy ladies. If you are an endomorph, you will never be able to eat whatever you want and be stick thin. If you're an ectomorph, you'll never be able, well, that's not true. You could, you'd have to work really hard, but it's quite hard for you to get big and curvy like an endomorph. And knowing, kind of identifying where you are on that scale, and it's not like you're this, you're this, or you're this. It's like ectomorph here, endomorph is here, and there's kind of a continuum. Mesomorph is somewhere in the middle. But working with that, and then based off of what your body type is, there's different fueling needs and different fueling strategies to optimize performance and optimize your physiology. Did you find anything interesting in that?
Yeah, well, this is actually an area that I spent a lot of time studying. When I was in graduate school, I actually took a certification course to become a certified anthropometrist, which is, really using a detailed method of skin folds and bone breadths and circumferences to try to get an overall idea of your somatotype. And basically when you plot these, it's not quite a triangle, but kind of a widened triangle shape between the three general somatotypes. And then they will place you on a range. So you aren't just categorized as one of the three, but you might be able to shift your gradient either way between like mesoendo or mesoectomorph. And those things are modifiable with training too. So when they started doing a lot of these studies, they compare them to what they call like the phantom Z-score, which is your just stereotypical body type, right? And you can give somebody a base score based on trying to account for their frame size through like bone breadths at knee, elbow, hips,
Yep.
even shoulder width, and skin fold sums throughout, I think it's 10 different sites, and then doing circumferences in different areas as well. So when you put all of those things together, you can get, basically a breakdown of 3 compartments of, frame size, lean mass, and fat mass, right? Mm-hmm. Compared to just saying fat mass and lean mass.
Got it, yeah.
So it helps you to understand where you are on the somatotype scale, what you might be good at, and what you might need to focus a little bit more on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's beautiful. That's probably a harder service to find. There's probably not that many people doing that.
Not that many, no. And to be honest with you, like, if you have access to a DEXA, it's going to be better anyways.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, like I can be very, very reliable with myself and compared to like a gold standard instructor.
Yep.
However, there's always going to be some variance between people who are doing that. And DEXA is, for sure, it's calibrated when you use it. It's super accurate, and it's easy, and it's not invasive. You don't have somebody literally pinching in 10 different sites. You know?
And with the DEXA, this isn't in the book, but it's good beta. Make sure you use the same DEXA machine over time. You don't want to do one up in Park City, one down in Salt Lake, one in Ohio. You want to hit the same machine each time if you can, and that helps with reliability. Mm-hmm. So I had notes on, if you are an ectomorph, your training focus needs to be strength and power, because it's hard for you to gain strength. It's hard for you to become powerful. So that's the bulk of your training. And then your focus on nutrition was eat good quality fats, 30 to 35 grams of protein every single meal. And you're having 3 to 5 meals a day. And then good quality carbs. So you absolutely cannot restrict carbs if you're an ectomorph. Like, you need them. You need them for fueling. You need them for energy. And that's kind of true across most people. But that's your focus as an ectomorph. And I thought it was interesting. It changes as you kind of go through. So if you're mesomorph, so that traditional athletic build, you're naturally better at power. So you want to adjust your training to focus with moderate endurance training, high intensity interval training, and plyo work. Like, that is Stacy's recommendation there. Mm-hmm. And you want to keep with good quality fats, moderate carbs. So you're going to have less carbs in your diet than the ectomorph, but you're not eliminating carbs by any means. And then you need slightly more protein, so 30 to 40 grams of protein per meal. And then every snack you have 15 grams of protein. So a mesomorph is going to do better with a higher amount of protein in their diet and a smarter selection of carbohydrates, not an elimination of carbohydrates. Yep. And then an endomorph, that's your curvy ladies. You're focused on strength training and high intensity interval training. That's what's going to help the most. And then for your carbs, you're focused almost primarily on a large variety of veggies, fruits, with some grains, but not starch-based grains. So you do better with quinoa than you would with potatoes. So really focused on your carbohydrate coming from fruits and vegetables. That's really good for your gut biome, and that's really important as an endomorph. And then you want to be in the upper range for protein intake. This is going to help you with body composition, insulin moderation, and blood sugar control. So the practical of that is, if you're an endomorph and you're a 175-pound lady floating around probably 23-24% body fat, you're going to want to consume at least 150 grams of protein per day. That's going to help you lean out. It's going to help you put on more muscle tissue. And it's really going to help you kind of control insulin and blood sugar, which is a little bit harder for someone that is an endomorph. Mm-hmm. So you can get really specific with your training recommendations and your training strategies based on your body type, which I thought was pretty sick.
Yeah, it's great.
I wanted to refer to the chart on page 92 in here, where she breaks down kind of fat percentages between men and women, which I think is really good to bring up. So essential fat, that is fat that you need to live. Women, you're going to be somewhere between 10 to 12%. So women cannot safely, for the average woman, there's outliers for sure, get below 10 to 12% body fat. For men, it's 2 to 5%. So men can be leaner. We don't have the hips. We don't have the boobs. That's the biggest difference. For an athletic woman, they're usually in that 12 to 22% body fat. For men, it's 5 to 13% body fat. So significantly different from a man to a woman there. General fitness is 16 to 25% for women, 12 to 18% for men. Good health is 18 to 30%, 10 to 25% for men. And then at risk, so that means you're kind of starting to flirt with a bit obesity or just an unhealthy amount of fat mass, is more than 31 for women and more than 25 for men. And I think the takeaway from that is a very lean woman is not as lean as a very lean man. To get equally lean, so bodybuilding lean, if that's your sport, that's fine. But to get that lean has health consequences that are more severe for women than for men.
Absolutely. It goes back to that, statement that performance and health are not the same.
Nope, not at all. Typically, I have the conversation often, performance comes at a cost, and that cost is typically health. So you cannot stay in a performance phase indefinitely, especially if physique is your performance.
Yeah.
So you got to go in and out of it. And then the general eating advice was eat low in the food chain. So less processed is all that means. Apple is better than apple pie, right? Just lower on the food. It's pretty self-explanatory. If it's a single ingredient food, that is generally going to be a little bit healthier for you. It's also probably going to be better for your blood sugar, better for your insulin, and it's probably going to be lower calories. The benefit of lower calories is you can eat more, be full more often, get better micronutrients.
Yeah, and you can look some of that stuff up on like a standard satiety index too.
Yeah.
And you'll see the difference.
Yeah, 100%. Time your intake. So for women, Stacy raves about this. Do not train fasted. It is not helpful. It is helpful for dudes. It is not helpful for women. It elevates cortisol. Cortisol is not a great thing for women to elevate intentionally. So do not train fasted. She recommends timing protein within an hour to 30 minutes before training, so 15 grams. And then you have to have 30 grams of protein minimum within 30 minutes of finishing your session. And that helps your body prepare and handle your training, and it helps you start to recover from your training, and you'll recover much better if you do that. I thought it was interesting. Her general advice was keep a base of 180 to 200 grams of carbs, which is a lot higher than a lot of the people just even here at Minerstown that are trying to get leaner.
Yep.
So putting yourself into a deficiency there, and then you kind of start to fight your physiology, start feeling worse, recovering worse, all the things you listed earlier. And then focus on body composition, not the scale. So if you start out at 135 pounds, you start training and you lose 3% body fat, but your weight goes up to 140 pounds, you're going to perform better, you're going to look better, you're going to feel better. So Don't get so focused on the scale. And then the last thing is fasting is not good or effective for women. And she goes into detail on that, but the main message that comes up again and again and again is stop fasting. It's not helpful.
Yep.
Yeah. Anything to add to that?
I think you pretty much covered most of the notes I was going to add in.
Sweet. So, to wrap up, train for muscle first, lose body fat second, don't train fasted.